everyone. Today, I want to explain something that's very deep. It's very advanced, but I hope that it offers some form of clarity. In these Yoga Sutras, he starts now talking more and more about Yun-Yin, which is the fundamental understanding of what yoga actually means. And what it pertains to is the knowledge of you being essentially not separate. You are not separate on the level of beingness, but also this display of form, this display that we call a world, a reality, is intrinsically also forming one conglomerate whole. So form is also not separate, even though it seems this way. It seems this way the moment you localize yourself, sort of, in space and time, or you take on thought. Simply for the reason that your mind, or the mind as such, is not able to process anything actually, other than when it creates distance to it, when it creates a form of duality to it. So perception is limited by the process of subject-object duality. What it means is you need to feel in this process as if you are observing something outside of yourself to experience, to evaluate whatever is seen as not you. So duality is necessary for creating experience, but it is not the fundamental reality of what you are, nor is it the factual reality of this more grander scope of things. So the Yoga Sutra talks a lot about this underlying union, but also the experience of union and what happens to the mind as you increasingly actually know what you are, as you start understanding your true self as awareness. And in this sutra, he says that once there is some distance to what? Distance to thoughts, distance to the identification with thought. Once you start understanding you are awareness, and there is a distance that happens to the identification with these thoughts. So thoughts are not taken. What does it mean? Thoughts are not taken on to be you anymore. Then you come to notice more of that spacious awareness that you actually are. Like the awareness that is behind the phenomena, but also the awareness that can put its attention on what is appearing, but with a distance, so it can actually observe a larger space. It can become aware of more of the spacious content that is arising within awareness. So, this awareness, what you are, the true self, can either be focused on itself. This is the path of realizing what you are, being more and more aware of awareness, focusing yourself back onto the screen, onto the blankness, onto that which has no thoughts, which is thoughtless, stainless. Then he says, awareness can also be focused on the places of sense perception. This is basically the sensations that you derive from the senses, the becoming more aware of these places where sense perception occurs, sensations of it. And most importantly, awareness can be aware of objects in a way that the object shines as you. Now, this can only happen, again, it is very, very advanced, it is very, very deep, but once awareness comes to know itself and you abide as awareness more strongly, awareness, if you ask yourself, has no subjective stance. Awareness itself is not bound to a focalized point of view. When awareness then focuses on an object, it is known to itself that there is no distance to this object. That this object is simply arising as everything else within this larger scope of awareness. When there is no more subjective stance, which is, by the way, in the Yogasutra, talked about as the first thing that goes. People often think the first thing that goes is the perception of objects. He says his view, his perception is the first thing that goes is the subjective stance because of knowing yourself as awareness. Awareness has no stance. But what happens then is that the mind becomes like a diamond. It starts reflecting objects not outside of yourself and not as they are learned to be, like not as a mental cognition of an object, but as the object truly is. You start reflecting this object. Thoughts appear within you that reflect an object, that reflect, for example, the thoughts the person has, or you see an object and there is something deeper revealed to you about that object. And for example, healers look at plants and there's something deeper that is revealed within themselves about this object. Fundamentally, it always comes down to the non-separate nature of what you are. But how you start noticing this, that you actually always already are awareness can be that the thoughts you take on to be yours, first of all, are not you essentially, you know this, but they might not even originate, now listen closely, from you. The anxiety, the depression, whatever it is, it might actually be a reflection from an object you are focused on, or an object that exists that awareness is focused on, independent from time and space, also because that again does not exist for awareness. So there is a process of intense binding, oneness that happens, in which, in this fast stance, it is simply samapatti. It means an intense binding, intense union that happens with what awareness is focused on. Now, how can we explain this a bit easier? Once this identification that you are somehow found in these thoughts is diminished, because you're not in these thoughts, there is like space is freed up. Space is freed up to perceiving differently. Not everything is yours instantly. Not everything is perceived instantly as yours. Thoughts are not instantly perceived as yours. They are perceived as arising within awareness. And so things can be reflected. And it is deeper than empathy, because we often think of empathy, because empathy is still perceiving that there are two distinctly separate entities to be found. And somehow, or telepathy is also something different. It isn't that you perceive something then outside of yourself. That's empathy or telepathy. You know, oh, this person has these kind of thoughts. This is deeper than that. It is a clear reflection that is actually not just like a funny gimmick. It is meant to continuously point you deeper to the oneness, the underlying non-separate essence, underlying non-separation that already actually exists, but that we are not aware of. So slowly, by becoming aware, you then see this, that things are more reflected or mirrored back. Thank you for listening and your presence and your awareness on this. It's very deep, it's very advanced, but it will already speak to you on a level that is also already knowing actually of these teachings. Namaste.